Welcome visitors and newcomers. I don't see anyone here in the sanctuary, but Mary Beth is our greeter. We have one newcomer. So you can talk to Mary Beth after the service, and if you're here on Zoom, we have Kathleen Oldfather to welcome you. Let's take a moment to acknowledge the Native nations that belong to this land, including those who came from as far away as the Delaware, those who settled here, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, and those who continue to call this area home: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo tribe of Kansas, the Iowa tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri and Kansas and Nebraska.
Beautiful Hands by Catherine Otoshi and Brett Baumgarten. We'll see if I can match the screen. What will your beautiful hands do today? Will they plant ideas? Or touch hearts? I really like that butterfly. Will they lift spirits? Or stretch imaginations? Is that a dragon? Oh, they're ahead of me. Will they reach for love? And for peace, truth, faith, hope, and dreams? What will your beautiful hands do tomorrow? Should I read this part? No. Think about it.
In honor of Black History Month, Jean Sievers has a reflection for us about one of our ancestors, our spiritual ancestors, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper.
Good morning. In the city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the year 1854, a 33-year-old woman entered a streetcar and sat down. The conductor came to her and insisted she leave, but she stayed quietly in her seat. She did not move. When she reached her destination, the woman got up and tried to pay, but the conductor refused to take her money. She threw it down on the floor and left. Source information about the life of Frances, it's missing the S in the program. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper was a paper, Part of What We Choose, by Polly Peterson in a 2010 UU publication. Back to that bus ride, what was it all about? It was about racism. The white conductor was giving the woman on the streetcar, Frances Ellen Watkins, a hard time because she was African American, and Watkins was having none of it. She believed in equality. She believed in treating all people with dignity and respect. Her work obliged her to travel from place to place speaking and lecturing against slavery, and she was used to enduring prejudice and injustice. She had the courage not to let it stop her. Frances was born in 1825 in Maryland when slavery was still legal, but Maryland was a free state. Born to free parents, she was never a slave, but by the age of 3, she was an orphan, living with relatives in Baltimore. Her uncle William Watkins ran a school called the Academy for Negro Youth, and Frances received an excellent classical education there. Such schools for Blacks were very rare. By the age of 14, Frances had to leave school and go to work. She became a domestic servant, but this offered an opportunity. The Quaker family she worked for owned a bookshop and also had books in the house, and they gave her free access to all those books. She was an avid reader and soon became known as a writer also. By the age of 23, she had written enough poems and essays to publish a small book. Here I offer a collage of Watkins' life. Life for free Blacks was difficult and became worse after the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850. It made the hunting down of escaped slaves legal. So any Black was fair game, as they could not testify for themselves on their own behalf or even have a trial by jury. Fully legal in even free states to have these manhunts, Black hunts. She heard about a young man who unwittingly crossed into Maryland and was sold to a Georgia slave owner. He escaped, was sent back to Georgia, and she learned that he soon died. So she wrote to a friend, "Upon that grave, I pledged myself to the anti-slavery cause." She moved to Philadelphia and befriended William Still. His home was the busiest station on the Underground Railroad. For Watkins, the anti-slavery cause opened a whole new career. In 1854, she gave a public lecture, and her following included whites and Blacks alike, named The Education and the Elevation of Colored Race. Giving several lectures a week, she soon had a job for the State Anti-Slavery Society of Maine. She supported a movement called Free Produce, encouraging dumpster dive. Encouraging people to boycott all products tied to slave labor. She hoped Blacks would establish a network of schools, newspapers, and churches for the betterment of themselves and each other. In 1860, living in a small farm in Ohio, she married Fenton Harper. He died less than 4 years later, leaving her with a young daughter. She returned to the lecture circuit and traveled throughout the North, encouraging the Union Army to allow Blacks to join in the fight. The Civil War ended slavery in America, leaving Blacks with great hopes, but also enormous problems. She continued giving lectures and speeches, working in the South and in the North. Polly Peterson concludes, Frances Harper advocated for equality and reforms for the rest of her life. The racist rhetoric of her day was ugly, and white people who harmed or even murdered Blacks usually went unpunished. Yet she did not give in to anger and despair. Her words helped Americans across racial lines understand their common humanity and common yearnings. She believed she could contribute to the betterment of society by uplifting her listeners, and she hoped that their life might gladden the earth. She shone a light on injustice so that others might see it more clearly, but she remained confident that someday there would be liberty and justice for all.
Our caution in revealing ourselves to one another is not surprising. in this world where a celebration on the streets ends in terror. Sometimes it seems totally rational to be afraid of each other. Mass shootings break our hearts for many reasons, and one, which I felt this week, is my fear that our fear will push us away from community. Riding the streetcar last Sunday in Kansas City, hours before the Super Bowl kickoff, I saw a variety of red-clad enthusiasts. They were enjoying their own family and friend clusters while connecting with strangers. I even saw a Chiefs fan playfully harangue and then shake hands with somebody bold enough to wear a rival team's logo. I thought of them Wednesday evening, alone in my car, listening to the news headlines. They hadn't been afraid of each other, but now, would they be afraid to meet each other around their shared interest? Public violence chills our desire for collective life. It gives us reason to avoid each other. Now, avoidance is a good coping strategy for people surviving dysfunctional systems. Running away from people who may harm us is essential in times of danger. But the flight response to danger, like the fight and freeze lizard brain responses, it's not something to live by. I'm concerned that a climate of danger in public spaces will justify an avoidant approach to community life, to new systems and structures and assumptions that encourage us to avoid community life. The natural trauma that comes to us as survivors of terror and the secondary trauma that comes to us when we empathize and imagine terror, it is getting stuck in our bodies. I'm concerned that this collective trauma is shutting us down to one another. It may feel comfortable in a time of grief, but it makes it harder to heal. So in the spirit of being vulnerable with each other, I'll share that I know something about avoidance as a coping strategy. Because like 1 in 5 Americans, I lived with an alcoholic during my childhood. Addiction is just one of the many dysfunctions that ripple out and draw others into their own dysfunctional responses. Often this is called codependency. At first we do it to survive, and then just because we're used to it. I admit that my coping strategies have become lodged in my body and into my patterns of behavior. I identify as a recovering codependent because I choose not to live out those patterns, one day at a time. Avoidance is a classic codependent response. It's a human response to situations and relationships we can't fully escape, but we know are unhealthy. In my study of codependency, I've learned that I'm acting out of avoidance when I judge harshly what others think, say, or do, when I act in ways that invite others to judge me, when I avoid intimacy as a way to maintain distance. I'm acting out of avoidance when I use indirect or evasive communication to avoid conflict or confrontation. or when I suppress my feelings and needs because I don't want to feel vulnerable, or when I refuse to admit I don't know what I'm doing. I am acting out of avoidance when I withhold expressions of appreciation. This list of avoidant patterns knocked my socks off when I first read a version 13 years ago. In addition to codependent patterns of avoidance, there are also lists of codependent patterns of control, compliance, low self-esteem, and denial. And reading them, I had two reactions, which I've since learned are really common. First, has somebody been reading my private diary? And second, isn't everyone codependent? Don't we all act out of avoidance, denial, control, compliance? Don't we all have low self-esteem sometimes? I do believe that we are all codependent, or at least we live in a society that fuels codependency. We're intoxicated not just by substances, but by greed, racism, and compulsive violent acts and language. And I believe that this dysfunction is fractal. It shows up on every level: government and economy, our congregations, our families, and how we talk to ourselves. But resilience is also fractal. Everywhere that our humanity survives, there is a powerful impulse toward connection and healthy love. So I'll tell you one pattern of resilience at UUFM that helps us all recover. It's our culture of abundant expressions of appreciation. I'm going to pause for a minute and invite you to call up a spirit of appreciation or gratitude for somebody that you've encountered here today. And now another person here today. And I'm going to invite you to call up a spirit of appreciation for another UUFM related person. Maybe somebody you saw today, maybe from another day, maybe from your history here. And now take a moment to appreciate someone else in your life. And now spend a moment appreciating somebody you don't know that well, but who you interact with, or you have interacted with. And now how about a moment of appreciation for somebody that you don't know at all, but you know of? Or maybe you can imagine them. Somebody at the far edges of the ripples of your own life. I think it's powerful to feel appreciation, to take a moment. And one of the beauties of community is that it can arise naturally and give us that boost that comes with gratitude. There's this extra step, though, not just feeling it, but expressing it. And I think that this is an act, this is a spiritual act. It can be a spiritual practice that helps us heal and also helps society heal. When we express our appreciation, we're not only recovering our own humanity, but we're engaging in political resistance to dehumanization. There are many things happening in our world that make us feel powerless, that tempt us to surrender our hope and our commitment to a vision of universal human thriving. But don't do it. Don't let them harden you into despair. Do not isolate yourself in order to avoid the pain of love's loss. We must keep taking the risk to be vulnerable with each other, even as threats morph and we work together to learn new ways to protect our bodies and our souls. It might seem small to start with a moment of appreciation and then take the little risk of expressing that appreciation to somebody in your life, somebody in the fellowship. But I believe that it matters, and that as we practice here together with each other, we get better at doing it with the person on the streetcar that we didn't know that well. We get better at seeing the good in people we might otherwise think we have nothing in common with, no way to relate to. So in a few minutes, we're going to break into small groups for a spiritual practice of appreciation. It's a very concrete practice. You might mistake it for a conversation. But I'm going to call it spiritual because I believe that when we spend time saying beautiful truths about how we light up each other's worlds, we light up the whole world, even if just for a moment. This is the work of a diverse, evolving spiritual community, acting for a better world, one moment at a time, one day at a time, day after day, no matter what the news tells us has happened. So the spiritual practice today is to sit with some other folks and a short list of 11 or 12 names of fellowship members. Together, one name at a time, you will all have a chance to say out loud that person's gifts, talents, strengths, skills, or interests, to the extent you know them. What do you appreciate about this person that you think other people will appreciate too? Each of our small groups has a note taker. Thank you, note takers. And they will write down what you say. Does this feel a little awkward? I see some head nods. Yeah, it is countercultural to dwell publicly on other people's positive attributes. Feels a little bit like gossip. But there's really nothing wrong with saying good and true things about people, celebrating them. I'll ask, don't share anything you wouldn't want the person to hear you sharing. It's not a time to talk about their physical appearance or reveal a secret. This is about their strengths, gifts, talents, skills, and interests. The end result, which Hannah will share with us next week, is a summary of what we appreciate about all 111 of our members, which we will use to think about who is best suited to different roles in the congregation. So each small group only has 11 or 12 names, but later today, if you're a member of the fellowship, you can share your reflections on everyone else as well, including yourself. We would like to know what you see as your strengths and skills and gifts, talents and interests. So you can check your email when we finish here to see how to do that. So in our small groups, a couple things might happen. You might be new to UUFM, and you might not know many of the people on your list. In this case, I hope it's a pleasant experience for you to sit with other people and hear them share what they appreciate about these other people. And you might think, hey, I've got to go figure out who so-and-so is because we have some things in common and I'd like to initiate a conversation with them. You might not be new to this conversation and still not know the people on your list. If so, listen and learn about them. There may be people on your list that no one in your circle knows well. That's interesting. That's good for us to know. That will be good for us to know because we can follow up. When we were planning this service, one member of the generosity team was worried that once everything is compiled, people with shorter lists than others will feel bad. Now, I hope that's not the case. I hope that we will all be able to see the opportunity inherent in a short list. I hope the person who sees their short list will be inspired to show us more of themselves, and others will be inspired to reach out and ask and listen. Just a final note, if when you participate in this, I'll give you a moment in a minute to find your group. I'd ask that you, if you're really close with somebody, say married to somebody or partnered with someone, consider being in a different group from them so that we can get more of your collective knowledge about people. In the words Dick read earlier, as we work up the courage to unveil the beauty of our weirdness, as we mix our majesty with our vulnerability, let us release ourselves from the known so we can embrace each other's soul. Okay, so some final sort of air traffic control notes. We're going to sing our final hymn before we do this activity. Then we're going to break into groups. If you're here on Zoom, Dan is going to put you into 2 breakout rooms. It may take a few minutes, so please be patient if you're on Zoom. You might have to click a button to get into your room. If you're here in the building, I will ask you to find the note taker you're going to work with. Make sure your name is not on the list, because that would be too awkward. So find a note taker and a list, and find that your name is not on that list. Decide where your group is going to sit, and then if you want to go take a break and get a snack before you come back and do this, that's fine. Just come to agreement with each other. Now, after 20 minutes or so, when I'll look around and check in on the Zoom people and see if people are done, we will finish up, and then you can head off to your other Sunday activities, or if you want to join the community team meeting, you're welcome back in here physically or on Zoom into the large group, and we'll have some music to let you know that that's happening. So any questions about what we're gonna do? Maybe I over-explained it. Okay.